how are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you today?
Fine, fine. And thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. So can you tell me, how did we come to know each other? How did this occur?
I think it's through some website which talked about the leaders in project management in different, I think worldwide or something like that. So that's how I got your.
Yeah, I have been contributing a bit with Discipline Agile. It's been really interesting to see PMI acquire this framework, and it's more of a toolkit, really. It's not a framework, but it's been interesting to see the world change. We have a new normal with our pandemic, but we also have PMI changing its path a little bit and starting to think about different ways to scale Agile, different ways to bring Agile to the world, and also just organizing Agile a little bit, because Agile's been this crazy mix of different methods and frameworks and tools and gurus and shamans and everything. And so it's really been kind of gratifying to see this one book of knowledge that PMI has been putting together and rolling out. So I've been very active promoting that in Africa and Europe, and I'm glad that some of that information made it your way. So very interesting. So Singapore, it's 6 p.m. there, 6 a.m. here in Kentucky. Opposite sides of the planet.
6 a.m. That's a really good, very early time.
Well, it's typically when I work with my colleagues from Pune, but this week we're doing annual planning. So everybody is getting ready for late night meetings in Pune, because when we do annual planning, the global team tends to stretch out, and everybody works 12-hour days of the worst possible 12 hours. So, the annual planning is quite an endeavor for 2,000 software engineers. So we stay very busy for about all throughout the summer in the Northern Hemisphere. Every 3 weeks we go for a full week doing planning to try and make things happen. So it's interesting times.
Great. So shall I start then?
Yeah, please, let's do.
So what I will do is, first I will do a short introduction on leadership, then I will read your profile as an intro, and then we can get to the questions.
Sounds good.
The unprecedented pace of disruption and uncertainty makes leadership more relevant today than ever before. It is not position or power, but your leadership skills that help you to think in unique, creative ways. When faced with a crisis, a leader is forced to think and make critical decisions. A leader who empowers a team and gives the employees accountability increases the effectiveness of an organization. John Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Warren Bennis says, leadership is the capacity to turn vision into reality. And Bill Gates says that as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Today, I have the honor of having with me Andy Burns. Andy Burns, PMP, PMI, ACP, DACI, SPC, is a founding member of the Siemens Digital Industries Lean Agile Center of Excellence. Following the SAFE roadmap, Siemens Product Lifecycle Management stood up more than a dozen agile release trains for more than 1,200 software engineers. Over the course of this global rollout, Andy trained several hundred people worldwide in person and in a virtual classroom. Andy is also a disciplined Agile certified instructor. Andy is actively teaching several virtual DA courses, as well as live virtual PMP, PMI ACP, and SAFE. Andy is a long-time volunteer with PMI at the local and global level. The information offered in this session is a solidarity commitment to help everyone adapt to today's challenges. DA is right at home in a virtual world. Thank you, Andy, for having me on this show, coming on this show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
I'd like to begin by asking you, what do you think are 3 traits that a project manager or a leader should have to thrive in a disruptive economy?
Well, 2 of the traits are given to us by nature. Ears. You must be able to listen. And I think I loved your introduction because you talked a little bit about the modern way of managing. And, the days of Taylorism where there was, one command and control guru that could drive everything out are long gone. And what you need to deal with the world, especially the crazy world that we live in 2020, is the ability to decentralize decision-making and to put those decisions at the level where the work is. So you need to have, along with good ears, to hear where people are working and what problems they face in their own local context. You need a good set of eyes to see where the work is happening and what decisions need to be made at those points. So these are some of the skills that I think are so critical right now. And then, along with, being able to hear what people are telling you and, being able to do that without ego and understanding that they really do see the work better than you, and, having that ability to let the decisions be made where they're best made. You need to understand the possibilities of decisions, the range of ideas that are available to us. And not because you would force one of those ideas on a team, because local context counts for every problem that we face. But there are good ideas, good practices that are available. And it's really, really important to be able to say, let's lean this process out. Let's think about the issue you're facing. Here's 5 or 6 practices that others have tried. And now let's think about them in your context. And I need you as a team to make a decision about which one of these processes you will try. And this is very interesting because many people do not think of PMI as the organization that would reach out and say, choice is good. You should make your decision. We're very often thought of as a structured group with all the rules, a big book of knowledge, 7th edition coming out, and this is the way things must be done. And I think there's a great movement afoot to say, choose your way of working. Maybe it will be Scrum, maybe it will be Kanban, maybe it will be Waterfall. What's appropriate for you? Let's talk about it. And by the way, if you make the wrong decision, we'll change it. Everything is being tested. So I think the last capability I would add into leadership is the ability to empirically look at the problem, look at the numbers, and try to drive your hypothesis from there. What is the best way to go forward? And to teach people this way to go forward. Well, thank you. That's a great question.
Very interesting. Now it comes to crisis response. How would a leader respond to a crisis? And what is the most important part of that response?
Well, and I will just talk about what we did at Siemens Digital Industries when COVID started to become a very big problem. And I was actually on a training circuit in Northern America at the time, bringing new teams up to speed on SAFE. And it became clear very quickly that we would not be traveling around to do training. And for many, many years, I had been the strongest proponent of co-location. And I said, well, you just can't do training if you're not in the same room with people. You need that face-to-face hot communication channel. But I learned something from this. I learned that if you have the right tools in place, if you think about the flow and practice of the class before you go forward, you can face the crisis. You can face it by establishing a live virtual classroom. And the live virtual classroom actually turned out to be better than the physical one. So it really comes down to, in a crisis, don't focus on the problem. The problem is obvious. Everyone in the world knows what this problem is. The solutions are not so obvious. And humanity must focus on the solutions and think about ways that we could try to fix the problem. And what we do in Kentucky might be different than what you do in Singapore, might be different than what my colleagues in Pune or Texas or California or Jerusalem do. But every context is a little different. Everybody needs to come up with their own hypothesis of how to deal with things and then watch it empirically, follow the testing in the case of COVID, and deal with it locally the way that we must. Take the emotion out of the equation and focus on the potential solutions. And so when we got hit and we went into shutdown mode, we had 1,200 software engineers who were used to coming together for big room planning or open space planning. They were used to physically being present with each other. And suddenly they all had to do that virtually. And now think about that. That's not an easy thing to do. We're a very, very high security environment. Our software is life critical, it's business critical, it's on the highest end of the spectrum, it must be protected. And so to have the appropriate security in place, we had to have encryption available to all 1,200 people that was never available before. We had to have breakout rooms available that were never available before. In a virtual setting, everybody dialing in from home from different countries around the world, different time zones, different capabilities of systems. And so we could very easily focus on the fact that you can't do that. But I knew my engineers better. I knew they could do it. If we gave them options and said you could do Teams, you could do Slack, you could do WhatsApp, you could do any number of things that we can, get the right security on, and they did it. And the very first program increment planning, within under the COVID clouds, went very well. In fact, in a lot of ways, it went better because a lot of the documentation and things that need to be translated into the Agile tooling after meeting together in person kind of happened automatically. And the software that we build to do program increment planning, we had a little advantage there in that we can modify that software because it's ours. And we did that immediately. We looked at the problem and said, okay, here's 5 or 6 different solutions. Put them in the software. When do we want it in? Today. We'll do it right now. And Siemens software is very compatible like that. So we had some things going for us, but in a crisis, a leader is going to acknowledge the problem and not try to diminish that in any way and be very real about that. But also, say, okay, let's go into problem-solving mode. Here's the 5 or 6, big issues we face. What's our decision tree? And the leader will not try to impose a decision because in my case, this unit of 1,200 software engineers with 2,000 people, all together wrapped around them. This is a living system of people. Living systems will resist change that is imposed upon them. And they should, because ultimately that living system is the one that's going to face the consequences of change. So they're not resisting the change to adapt to COVID. They're resisting a process that would not involve them. So you must involve people and you must get them to make decisions. And, of our more than a dozen Agile release trains, some may have stumbled. Some may have started to run right away. When the dust settled from that first program increment planning and our first open spaces, we all came back together at a solution level and said, what worked, what didn't work, what could be done better? And we looked at it empirically and said, okay, who's got most of their planning done for the next 6 iterations, which is typically the goal of our program increment planning. And the ones that did very well, we said, okay, let's talk about these good practices. And other teams, it's not a fail-safe environment. It's a safe-fail environment, saying it's okay if that didn't work. What would be wrong is to continue to do something that didn't work. Let's try some other ideas. And we moved along. We actually had just tremendous progress.
So the key points: acknowledging the situation, keeping your focus, and being ready to accept failure. That's interesting. Now we come to taking care of a team. How to keep your team motivated and connected during a crisis? And the second part of that is, how do you support them if they have any needs?
Well, certainly leadership has to understand that people are fundamentally good. And if you don't believe that people are fundamentally good, you're going to have a very hard time leading. If you don't like horses, you can't lead a cavalry charge. You need to be convinced of this. And I think that, with that faith in people, you can go forward and you can, carry food and water for the team and be a true servant leader. And this is at all levels. This is from your Scrum Master, your release train engineer, the Scrum Master of the Scrum Masters, the solution train engineer, the Scrum Master of the release train engineers. And so in our system, we have people that are always focused on helping the team, the aggregated teams, the bigger teams. And it comes down to empowering them to make decisions and saying, you want to be somebody who's developing some mastery, some technical excellence. So for your individual teams, what is technical excellence? What is your life journey? Are you a full stack developer? Are you a quality engineer? Are you a UX person who's embedded with a team? What are the tools we can bring you to help you through this crisis? We moved a lot more people into a different type of automated wireframing tool. We helped our engineers who had huge GitHubs to repo and said, well, what can we do? You obviously can't be doing this on a laptop. You have some major data transfer issues. How can we have somebody locally, in the building who can do some things for you remotely that you can't do? How can you tackle all these issues one after another? So the number one job is to find the blockers for these teams and to put the decisions in front of them and say, what is it you want to do that will make things better? And I go beyond when we manage an agile team, just saying, we do Scrum, you must do Scrum. Scrum is immutable. No. We say, you are building our software. What is the most important thing for you? Here's our basic guidance. These are the Scrum practices. These are what we would like Scrum teams to use. If you don't want to do iteration planning for 4 hours or 2 hours at the beginning of every iteration, how would you like to do it? Adapt that plan. And if that's not working in this crazy new world where everybody's got kids and dogs and cats jumping in front of their screens, and you just can't meet at these times, how will you adapt? And we had teams that said, now that we're all at home and we're all online and we're getting things recorded as part of the session, let's just share those recordings. Let's post them up to Teams. We use a stream on Teams, and let's post the recordings and share them. And something really beautiful happened there, which was really quite incredible. When you have good recordings, everybody can watch them faster. You can speed up the recording and play it back. So now there's a little contest going on around the world at Siemens. How fast can you listen to a recording? Some of our people say, I can listen to it at 2.2 times faster. Now, I personally can only go up to about 1.7 times faster. But, there are little things like this that happen. So, that's a little bit of coherence. The other thing that we find is people are still people. We all have the same needs. And it's very, very important to give people some time just to be a team together. And to get together and say, what is it that would, help you in this struggling time? And we have, for example, many of our people have other people around them in their lives who help them do things. And so one Siemens employee might be supporting 3 or 4 other families in this current weird world. And because those connections are broken by shutdowns or lockdowns or, trying to not spread this virus, how do we connect with those people that we've always supported? Our schools, our communities, the people that help us do work. And to give people some time to do that and to let them, think about better ways to do that and to actually talk about those sorts of things amongst our teams, our local teams. And, give people some of that time, we call it a water cooler talk. Just have a conversation. So our UXers actually led the way with this, and they just have a half-hour meeting every week. And the only rule in that meeting, it's an open space type format, is you're not going to talk about work. You're going to talk about everything else. How's the kids? How's the cat? How's the husband? But you're not going to talk about work. And that's been very helpful too. So we attend to people, we attend to technology, and, leaders always have to attend to process. You make this assumption that people are fundamentally good. If there's a problem, the process is bad.
Yes. That point about taking care of people, that means because people spend so much part of their lives at work that giving them a space to express about anything other than work is such a good thing that it brings a balance in their lives also.
Oh, and typically our people are very senior engineers, and just in orbit around their lives and their homes, there are many other people that depend on them, and we're very fortunate because we can all work remotely being engineers. But there are other people that need our help, and reaching out to them is very important as well, and keeping them afloat is something that it won't get advertised that this is happening, but we are better together. And I guarantee you that there are 1,200 engineers from Siemens who are helping everyone around them every day. So, this is all part of the leadership. And, our people are leaders in their own spheres. And this is, we get back to the point of making the decision where the work is. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made in the home based on these new home offices. We need to give people the authority to do that, and we have. It's been very gratifying. In many ways, I've learned that a lot of my ideas about lean agile, have probably been wrong. I don't think co-location is as important as I always thought it was. I think it's more important to be mindful about what you're saying and what you're doing. And I miss my colleagues. I do want to meet them by the water cooler again, and we will. And I do want to have open space meetings with them again, and we will. But the great efficiencies we are seeing in having our meetings virtually is lowering the carbon footprint of the world. And let's face it, we cannot continue to move the great mass of humanity every day to offices and create all this pollution and carbon and congestion and waste everybody's time traveling back and forth and expect that to be sustainable. And one of the key things about Agile is sustainable pace. And we do need to establish these sustainable paces, and these virtual environments are perfect for that because we can be virtual maybe 3 days a week, in person 2 days. And by the way, Siemens has already decided that this is the way we will go forward. Our CEO from Germany, Joe Kaeser, has said, we see that this is the way the world must be, and we're not afraid of it. We're going to go forward and do it. So I've learned a lot, and it's a pretty good trick for an old man like me to learn things and change his mind and be educated. But whatever plans you make, fate and nature will change them for you. So I'm gratified to have learned and adapted. So maybe that's the core of leadership, is the ability to learn.
If you look back at your career, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges that you have faced as a project manager, a leader?
I'm a big believer that the obstacle is the way. And early on in my career, I think the biggest challenge I faced was people that said, you'll never be a project manager. You should just continue to be an engineer. Now, knowing myself, I frankly was not a very good engineer. I was okay. But I knew there were many better engineers, but I knew that the process that was wrapped around the engineers was not good. And this goes way back. And we started to do extreme programming back in these times. And in the extreme programming environment, I saw, here's a process that delivers. It delivers consistently. And I got very excited about that. So a lot of times when you look back, what's your biggest problem? Usually that biggest problem is the way, and you must lock in on that. So that, early on in my career, that was the biggest problem, was people telling me, stay focused on being an engineer when I knew that wasn't for me. And when people come to me and say, I want to be a project manager, the first thing I say to them is, well, are you a very good engineer? Is this the way that you want to go forward? And we talk about that. And we talk about the beauty of building products and the beauty of software engineering. And that sometimes changes people's minds. Sometimes we talk and they say, yeah, I do want to be a project manager. But you have to know yourself. So the biggest challenge, I think, for anybody is to know yourself. And this is not something that comes easily. You need experience, and you need to make mistakes. You need to, not be afraid to say, I've tried this, looked into it, and I've come to know it's not for me. And that's okay. And that's really, really okay. You don't have to be embarrassed by the fact that you went forward and tried something and didn't work out. So maybe an engineer steps into a team leader role for a while and discovers that they don't like carrying food and water for the rest of the team. And they decide, you know what, I'm going to focus on being a full stack developer. It's absolutely fine. Or they try quality engineering for a while, say, yeah, I'd rather be an engineer. Or they try project management. They love it. They absolutely love it. And, I go back far enough that project management wasn't a thing when I started. There was no job out on monster.com called project manager. So when I first saw extreme programming and said, wow, this is for me, I want to be the team coach, there was no project manager role to jump into. It was, a player coach on a team. So interesting times, but I'm so gratified, by my life journey on that front. Thank you. That's an awesome question.
Today, the new norm is that we are moving away from a co-located workplace where we have a lot of face-to-face meetings and seeing each other every day, to a new norm, the virtual workplace, wherein you have Skype, Zoom, Google Meets. So how do you lead in such an effectively in such a virtual workplace?
Well, our local COVID lockdowns started late February, March-ish timeframe. And then, of course, the world very quickly thereafter. And so many of our teams were used to getting together in rooms with paper and pen and whiteboard, and doing their program increment planning or their open space planning. And so how do you lead in an environment where you know that that will not happen? You know that this is not going to happen. And there are a lot of people out there that are in denial and saying, well, it will be a couple of weeks, or, we'll work through it. And cadence is so important to an organization. You need to continue to do things on a good cadence, and so you have those opportunities to synchronize. And so what do you do? Well, you can't impose change on a system, but you can help them to realize, well, number one, and these were conversations I was having back in February and March, we will not be meeting together and doing live meetings. First conversation with Scrum Masters, release train engineers. We won't be meeting that way. And this is going to be an extended period of time. This isn't going to be measured in weeks or quarters. It's going to be years. This is a very big change, and some things will change permanently. And to make that statement is shocking. It's a shocking statement, and people were justifiably shocked, and some of them are angry at that statement. And so am I imposing my will on them at that point? No, I'm saying this is the reality that's come. So now something has been destroyed in our world. And this happens all the time. There is a great cycle of destruction and creation and sustainment that we must deal with. And so how do we sustain ourselves going forward? Well, here are some options. And we began to trot out Microsoft Teams. We began to trot out whiteboard tools, concept board, Miro, go down the list of different apps that we put on the tabs in our Teams environments. And I'm not here to promote Microsoft products. It's just, it happened to be something that was available to us. And so as you put all these things out there in front of people, people are like, well, what should we do? And I say, well, you have to figure that out. Your Agile release train has 150 people, so you need to take care of that 150 people in your fold. What you've done before has been destroyed. You need to come up with some new innovations. And once you get them running, you need to sustain these people. And oh, by the way, they're in the same boat as you. Their personal worlds have been destroyed. They need to come up with new ways to deal with their family, new ways to deal with their home office. You need to be mindful of this and give them some space to do that. And if your program increment planning needs to be shorter, and we need to fall back and focus on some of our technical debt, let's do that. Let's make things as simple as possible this go. Let's get, some great recordings out there from people explaining these changes. And we had lots of little technical issues like, key cards and access and machines and monster developer workstations that had to be on premise because they had so much data going back and forth. So we had lots of things that we had to put task force together to go through blockers. So, there were many, many things like that, but it comes down to, and I really love this about Disciplined Agile, and I just think it's so brilliant that PMI has picked this up. Disciplined Agile is a book of knowledge for all Agile processes. And that's a stupendous statement to make because there are so many Agile processes. And of course, the book is incomplete because we know PMI will be modifying this book every 4 years for the rest of time and putting more and more good practices. But think of the power of us. There are 1 million members to PMI. There are many, many more affiliated people. All of these good practices will start to show up as process goals and options in this Agile book of knowledge. And you can bet that when COVID hit, I was digging in that Agile book of knowledge very hard, looking for options for all these process goals that we supported because things had been destroyed. And many of these options, I could say, we could do personas, we could do wireframes, we could do use cases, we could do, let's think about all these other things that your team may not have done before. How will we automate this process? We have a persona, Engineer Ed. Engineer Ed hangs up on a poster in all the locations. Engineer Ed needed to become a virtual person along with everything else. So it's interesting, but I'm terribly proud of our people and how well they adapted. And, there's no credit for leadership because, the decisions were made where the work is done and the work continued to be done. And what's truly, truly fascinating is we're doing more work now. Our sustainable pace has bumped up a notch and our carbon footprint is lower. And our people have more time with their families. And perhaps we haven't even hit the hard part of this pandemic yet. Who knows? But the courage I've seen from everybody has just been phenomenal. It's been really great.
Many companies were taken by surprise at the beginning of this year when this pandemic struck. So how do you preempt such a risk and factor it into your risk management?
I think by having a diversity of ideas, we were very resilient. And so let's discuss that. We've got more than a dozen arts, out there running, flourishing, and each one of them is operating in their own context. And several of these arts are operating in a context already where the people are spread out across the planet. So some arts have people in Israel and Pune, Texas, in the same art, working together. Some arts are more homogeneous and, they may all be together in Mumbai. But because we had this diversity of ideas and because we were open to doing things in different ways in different arts, we were already looking at the risk. We didn't know we were looking at it. But since we were operating on this cadence of producing things consistently and producing things in different ways and letting people choose their ways depending on their different local contexts, we were powerful because the people that got really, really hit and really, really hurt by the pandemic had other models to look at and other ways to pivot very quickly. And so that's always an interesting thing about a lean agile program. The risk mitigation is built right in. And when you take a lean agile framework, like Safe or Less or Nexus, or one that tends to be a little bit more rigid, and you put the discipline agile toolkit on top of it with the flexibility and, choosing your way of working and saying, we're not going to be part of the agile industrial complex. We're going to let people make some decisions that are right for where they are, and we're going to be tolerant of these different decisions. You get a power that is really, really hard to beat. I mean, you're off to the races. You can't be stopped because if you think about it, every one of our arts is 100, individual thinking, creative people changing the process the way they need, looking at our guidance and saying, like that part of the guidance, don't like this part, we'll change it. So risk management, is something that we think about constantly in little ways. But I love your question because it was, what do you think about it in the big way? And it turned out we did. And we thought about it kind of naturally and organically. So that was great.
What do you see as a future for project managers?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Because, obviously I'm an old gray-haired man from Kentucky, right? And I sort of look back 20 years and think, Scrum is new. Scrum is not new. Scrum was written by old men 20 years ago. The newer people coming up, our freshers, are sort of amazed that we want to have meetings. They're like, well, I can just go to the channel on Slack and look at this. Or I can look at the channel on MS Teams, and I really don't need to have a stand-up meeting. And so I think that our world is going to become more and more real time. I think that the people that are coming to the workforce now are such digital natives that being a virtual person and being in a virtual community is 100% natural to them. And they're absolutely fine. So I think for project managers, planning and Gantt charts and the way that we operate And even this notion of cadence and synchronization being every sprint is going to have to change. I think that cadence and synchronization is moving towards daily with CI/CD. I think that, if you look at the stupendous amount of change that the apex predators of software engineering are putting into the world every day, look at how many times Amazon promotes software. We've come to know that project managers need to be reacting all the time. So I'm interested in, as kind of my own growing edge, where we're going to deal with the real-time world. And I'm not entirely sure we're ready for that. I think it's something that we need to deal with. And, at Siemens, we've got a pretty large program. I do believe, just in terms of, the number of people, we count as one of the top 10 software engineering product development companies in the world. And when you look at this program and we talk about process and we talk about toolkits, I'm really the process janitor. I'm the custodian. Where the real action is DevOps. And DevOps is the most important thing that we're all doing because the world is becoming, real time, and it's go, 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 go. So I do think project managers will learn a little bit in the coming years. And I think, again, I'm so intrigued by the possibilities of 1 million members contributing to the Disciplined Agile Toolkit and talking about things like this. And, how do you discover scope in real time? Lean Agile thinking with Eric Ries and the Lean Startup is, currently the state of the art, but maybe that's a little too slow. Split testing, A/B testing seems to be state of the art. Putting telemetry in your software, state of the art. What's faster than that? I think we'll discover it. And I think as project managers and part of this community, the true value of our community is when it's discovered, you'll find it here first with us. So I really do like that.
Which brings me to my final question. Do you have any words of advice for youngsters who wish to take up a career in project management?
I'm sorry, we cut out a little bit. Modern Zoom issues. What was the last part of the question?
Do you have any words of advice for youngsters who wish to take up a career in project management?
Yeah, I do. So if you're a fresher and you're just coming out of school and you're looking around, first off, you're doing the right thing. Look around. And second off, get a job, get a solid job, and save some money. And it's really important to put some money in the bank and live below your means, because when you get into project management, you will occasionally be put into situations where you'll have to stamp your feet and say no. And it really helps to have enough money in the bank to feel comfortable doing that. So take some time and be wise, save some money. The second thing is, don't be the project manager because you think that that's the way to become the boss. Because project managers should never be the boss. They should be empowering everyone else to be their own boss. They should be giving people that chance to master their skills. And people will look at a project manager and say, well, they talk to all the senior leadership. They're giving status reports on the entire project. Well, that's all well and good, but they shouldn't be in charge. So if that's your motivation, don't do it for that. So what should your motivation be? Your motivation should be a love of progress. Your motivation should be, a love of seeing people achieve things and, going forward. And remember, a project is a delivery of a unique product or service. So if you're someone who likes steady state, project management is probably not for you. If you're somebody who likes change and you're very comfortable working in gray areas, this might be something to explore. And by the way, you may not know this about yourself. So if you're a software engineer and you're out there and you can deal with things that are broken and you love to hunt bugs and you're, really engaged when the going gets tough, maybe you want to do that. But if you're, more interested in steady state and being the sustainer of the platform and making sure that everything is taken care of, that's also an incredibly valid and viable way to go forward. And maybe you'd be more interested in architecture and making sure that the designs are 100% solid. So take some time and don't go too fast. Life is long. You have plenty of chances to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure speaking to you. And thanks for sharing your wisdom and insights on all those questions.
I appreciate it, and thank you, and be safe in Singapore.
Yeah, you stay safe too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Stop the recording.
Okay, yeah, me too. Was that okay?
Yeah, it was good.